there, time machine travelers. So I hear you're writing an LEQ. Well, here's a quick review on how to LEQ. First, you need the rubric. It's down below in the comments just in case you need another copy. So we're going to go over the rubric real quick, and if you have any questions, make sure and drop them in the comments below, and I'd be happy to help. You can also email me at missjziegler@gmail.com, and I'll answer your questions that way as well. If you're at Westside, you can come in after school to LC9. I'm there Monday through Thursday until 4:15. Okay, let's get started. The first thing you need to do is contextualization. Contextualization is like what sets up the story. You know, the very beginning on Star Wars where it scrolls up the screen, that is telling you the context of what happened in the last episode, or, you know, what happens before what you're about to see. So think of contextualization as kind of like the first chapter of a book, okay? You need to know this information to kind of set the stage for your event. So basically, it's what causes this to happen, or what's going on in the rest of the world to explain these events. It has to connect. That's the important part. It can't just be random things going on. You have to be able to connect it to your prompt. For example, if you're talking about similarities and differences between the Silk Road and the Trans-Saharan Trade Route, you're going to want to talk about what sets up the Silk Road and what sets up the Trans-Saharan Trade Route, what's going on in the world at that time. You can talk about that people are traveling more and starting to get outside of their little villages where they've lived all their lives. One of the reasons they're doing this is because of the Crusades that happen. And when they go on the Crusades and they start coming home with these items, other people are starting to want things from other cultures, okay? Obviously, you're going to want to be a little bit more detailed. The more detailed that you are, the better. But this is an easy point to get if you know the reasons or the things that set the stage for your prompt. If you have no clue, then don't waste your time. This is one point, right? And there are several other points that you can earn. So if you don't know, just leave a little bit of space. You might be able to go back and write it later. Something might jog your memory. Okay, so that's context. It's basically the beginning of the story, what leads up to this prompt. You can also do what happens after your prompt. If you're talking about the Silk Road, you could talk about how the Silk Road dies out over time and the reasons why. Remember that context can be before or after, but it has to be more than just one sentence, and it has to connect to whatever you're talking about. All right, second thing, this is a really important point. You need a thesis or your claim of what you're going to be discussing in the paper. So if we're talking about similarities and differences between trade routes, okay, let's use that example. Our thesis has to have some kind of claim. So you're probably going to want to put in there the similarities and differences that you're going to talk about. Use the prompt for this. Use the wording of the prompt. You can say one similarity of the Trans-Saharan Trade Route and the Silk Road is, while the differences are ... You want to have 3 total. At least try to have 3, because that way you have some extra in there just in case you have one of them wrong. Remember though, in your thesis, you're putting in there whatever you're going to talk about. If you just say there are similarities and differences between the Silk Road and the Trans-Saharan Trade Route, and that's it, you don't get that thesis point. You have to make a claim in order to get that thesis point. It's super important to write a good thesis, and here's why. Because you can take your thesis and break it down into the paragraphs of your essay. Here's an example. Let's say that you were asked to compare the Trans-Saharan Trade Route and the Silk Road. Here we go. You have a thesis. It says, the Silk Roads and Trans-Saharan trade routes differ in the commodities exchanged. However, they are similar in that they both spread religion and stimulated technological innovations through interregional contact. All right, there's your thesis. You have one difference and two similarities. Okay, so your first paragraph, you have your context and then your thesis. Here's your thesis. This very first difference is going to be the topic sentence of your second paragraph or your first body paragraph. So your first topic sentence would say, the Silk Road and trans-Saharan trade routes differ in commodities exchanged. And then you're going to start describing that. The how, the why, the vocab words. Then, however, they're similar in that they both spread religion. Boom! There's your third paragraph and your topic sentence for your similarity. All you need to say after you're done with this paragraph is, one similarity is that they both spread religion. Start explaining it. How, why, vocab words. Then, your fourth paragraph will be this one. Stimulated technological innovations through interregional trade. So this is number 4. You can throw interregional trade in with that one as well if you would like. Or a different word for that. But basically, boom, you have your first paragraph, your second paragraph, topic sentence right here. Don't forget the topic sentence, super important. Third paragraph, topic sentence, fourth paragraph, topic sentence. You're basically breaking down your thesis into your paragraphs. That's so simple if you have a good thesis. Now, if I had simply written, there are similarities and differences between the Silk Road and the trans-Saharan trade route, period, I wouldn't have my topics. So you need to remember to get those topics in there, then break that thesis down into your 3 paragraphs. It's just that simple. Make sure that you stick to what you have in your thesis. Don't write about anything else but this. This is what your evidence should be on. This is what you're supporting. This part is about evidence that goes with your thesis and supporting your argument. So if you're saying that it's a similarity, you have to be able to prove why it's a similarity by giving examples and evidence. Evidence can be vocab words, people, anything that relates to proving that idea. It's a good idea to have at least 5 pieces of evidence. If you can think of more, great. If you could put 5 pieces of evidence in each paragraph, awesome. The more evidence that you have, the better. The supporting part is basically going to be explaining your idea. So if you're talking about the similarity of, the goods that they traded on the Silk Road and the Trans-Saharan, you want to have specific goods. You want to talk about why that's a similarity, where are these goods coming from. The more that you can put in there about this, the details, be specific, remember, then you're going to be able to get these points. Now, if you don't get the evidence point, you cannot get the support point. So it's very important to have your evidence in there. Support is going to be like explanation of how and why. Remember, if they're asking for a change, because they can also ask for changes in LEQs, then you're going to talk about before and after the change. That shows change. All right? So evidence, you have to get that point in order to get this point. This is basically giving more details about whatever you're talking about here. Your last 2 points are earned in analysis and reasoning. Analysis is a pretty simple point to get because what you're basically doing is showing that you understand which historical thinking skill they're asking about. So there are 3 historical thinking skills that College Board could possibly ask you in an LEQ. That's cause and effect. That's similarities and differences. Is CCOT, or change over time, or continuity over time. Those are the 3 historical skills that you could possibly be asked about. For example, if we're talking comparison, you would say similarly or distinctly, okay? Similarly shows that they're similar. Distinctly shows that they're different. You're using words that's going to prove one of these thinking skills. Use those words within your argument. I'd say try to do that at least 4 or 5 times. That should get you the analysis point. The last point, reasoning. This one is a really hard point to get. We're gonna draw a pink bubble around it because it's so difficult to get. It's sometimes called the unicorn point or the mystery point because it's a very, very hard point to get. Basically what you're doing is really writing a really well done essay in order to get that point. There's some examples on the rubric I shared down below. If you're asked for similarities and differences, you might describe more than one similarity and difference, or both, and you might do it very, very well. If you're asked about cause and effect, you would describe both cause and effect and maybe put an extra one in and do it very well. In order to get this point, very well is the key. Another thing you can do to get this point is to make a relevant connection within or across time periods. So connecting it to something else that's relevant. That's the key there. You can't just randomly throw out some sentences. It has to connect and it has to be relevant. And you have to explain it well. You can't just put one sentence in and expect to get that point. The last one is confirming validity of your argument by explaining multiple perspectives. That last one is a hard one to do, but you might be able to if you really know your history well. So the key here is knowing history. That's how it is with all of these writing essays. If you're not reading and retaining what you're reading, if you're not studying it, if you're not listening in class, you're not going to be able to do these essays very well, right? You have to have the information in order to complete the essays. So it's super important that you don't just take notes in class and then never open your notebook again. Study them, make flashcards. If you're not understanding the reading, then come to Saturday tutorials and we'll read together. I can also read with you after school. If you're only reading the Amsco book and not the online book, it's not enough. You have to read the online book as well. If that book's too hard for you, come and get help. You have to take initiative. These essays are going to be extremely difficult for you to write if you don't have the information. And I'm pretty sure you already know that because you have some experience with the LEQ. And you know that your grade on the LEQ probably wasn't good if you weren't able to be specific. Okay, so real quick recap, contextualization, what's going on in the whole world that connects with this prompt and has something to do with it. Thesis, make sure that you put in there what you're going to talk about. What's your argument? Okay. What are the similarities and differences you're talking about? What are the causes and effects? What are your changes and continuities that you're talking about? Then your evidence and support part is basically like the middle part of your essay. In your first paragraph, you're going to have your context and your thesis. This is number 1. Okay. Then you're going to have paragraphs 2, 3, and 4. This is where your evidence will be and your support. These are your body paragraphs. That's where the meat of your essay is going to be. So if you're talking about cause and effect in your thesis, you're going to have one paragraph about a cause, another paragraph about a cause, and another paragraph about an effect, or 2 effects and 1 cause. Doesn't matter, however you want to lay it out. But make sure you separate them into paragraphs and that you give enough evidence and support for all of them. Then within all of this, you're going to have your analysis. This is that language that shows change and similarities and differences and causation, okay? And continuity. Forgot about that one. All right, so analysis is going to be built within. Your last paragraph, you don't necessarily have to write one, but if you want to, you can reword your thesis. And this is where you can try for the unicorn point by perhaps extending that argument and comparing it to something else in a different time period, or putting an extra similarity or difference or an extra cause and effect. If you've done this really well, then it's possible that one of these might count for this. It just really depends on how strong this point is right here as well. So what I want you to do is mainly focus on that thesis. okay? Because the thesis is super important and it's super easy to get that point if you know that you have to write in your thesis what you're going to talk about, all right? So make sure you don't just put there are similarities and differences between the Silk Road and the Trans-Saharan Trade Route. No, you list them. Always list your similarities and differences, your causes and effects, or your change in continuities, whatever you're talking about, okay? That's number one. Then really focus on these 3 paragraphs because this is 2 points right here. If you get this part, that's 3 points already. We can always work on context. That will come as you're reading and as you're learning more and memorizing more. Don't forget, reword your thesis down here. Just in case you didn't word it right here and you don't get the point here, you can also get the point here. And then this point, just hope for the best. Really try your hardest to get as much information in there as you possibly can. And that's LEQ in a nutshell. We're going to be practicing those together all year long. Make sure you go to tutorials. Make sure that you really focus on this because if you do this well, this really helps your grade on the AP test. Not to mention, it just helps you become a better writer as a whole. Like I said, if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below. And last but not least, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. I do a lot of lives on this channel and it gives you great opportunities to ask questions. Also, we're almost to 1,000 subscribers, which is super exciting. So if you haven't subscribed yet, get in while you can. All right, and that's it for this episode of The Time Machine Teacher. Good luck on your LEQs.